The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. Let's talk about it. 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 On the field.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited about my guest today because we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and why it is so important for our children to have that. And my guest, she has tools to help make that happen. So let me bring her up. Hello, Angela. How are
Hello.
you?
I am so well, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm so excited. And first, let me share a little bit about you. For the first 54 years of her life, Angela was bullied, first by her father, then by the man she married. A disastrous California wildfire caused Angela to question her choices in life and seek to find her purpose. Angela is now an author of the highly praised children's book series, The Bella Santini Chronicles, which is known for helping children learn how to manage their emotions. Well, we are so grateful that you're here, and this is such a wonderful, needed topic because children have all kinds of emotions that they're feeling and going through, and sometimes they don't quite know how to express them. And so it comes out in misbehavior or it comes out with them becoming more introverted and other kinds of things. But before we get into all that, tell my audience a little bit more about Angela and your journey.
Oh my gosh. So, without going into too much detail, my father was a raging alcoholic, and it turns out that he had been abused by his father. And he was told, he was born in the mid 1920s, and he was really sensitive, apparently, as a child. Um, he was told that he was gay by his father. He was told he was a loser by his father. And in his youth, sometime in his teen years, he began drinking. And he realized that through drinking, he became a little numb to those feelings of inadequacy that he carried. And what happened is he had to drink more and more and more in order to maintain that numbness, because the feelings, they're always there. Until we actually face them and manage them, they're going to be with us. So basically, it was through his behavior that I learned that escaping a feeling is a prison of our own making.
Yes, yes. And he, okay, people self medicate. I disappeared there for a
You
minute.
did for just for a minute.
People self medicate because of all the pain that
Yeah.
they feel. And parents don't understand how powerful their words are. And when a child is told those kinds of things, you're
Mhm.
stupid, you're dumb, you're fat, you're ugly, you're nothing, you'll never be anything. I mean, like I heard
You're
those things.
worthless. You're
You're right. And so when children hear those things, how can we possibly expect them to have confidence, to have self esteem, to know how to interact and engage with other people when they don't know how to interact and engage with themselves. And so,
Absolutely. And it's, when we look at my father and the things he said to us, um, and the behaviors he had were pretty terrible. Um, I can look at that now and I can, picture the image of a raging alcoholic looming over a little girl and telling her she's worthless. In my adult understanding of that situation, I can see that his words describe him, not the little girl. But when you are the little girl, you're taking in that, and it's the truth because this is an authority in your life and they know everything. And
yeah,
so it's and that actually is one of the tools that I use when we revisit a situation from your youth and look at it through your adult eyes and realize that the criticism that people give us is really their filtered view of the world. So it
yeah.
says everything about who they are and nothing about who you are.
And that's why it's so important to recognize what Eleanor Roosevelt said when she said, "No one can make me feel inferior without my permission." But
Um,
as children, getting children to understand that when their parents are lashing out like that or being bullies towards their children and things like that, they're hurting. The parent is hurting, and the parent
exactly.
is not dealing with their own unresolved issues and their own misconceptions and behaviors, and so they lash out
Yeah.
at the child or at those who love them. And so that's why the work that we do is so important, to
Yeah.
help kids understand that we have to learn not to take things personal. But
And
it's hard.
it's so easy for people to say, well, don't take it personally, and so hard for us
Yes.
to say, well, that's not about ourselves. But the way it's handled through my books is um, just kind of plucking yourself out of and taking a airplane view of the situation, and then when you're not down there in the conflict but you're plucking yourself out of it, that way you can see it with clarity. And so that's a really powerful tool to revisit a time when you were criticized by someone, and because you were a child you made it the truth about,
Yes. Yes.
but you can tell the new truth to the
Yes.
child
Yes.
when you revisit
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yes. Because if people tell us these things and we have no other points of references and we don't know our own inner strength and inner greatness, it it shatters.
It does.
It shatters. And
And
that's why, go ahead.
yeah, it it drives decisions that take you on the path of life. For instance, I wouldn't have married my first husband if I had enough self esteem to know I deserved better treatment.
Yes. Yes, and that's something we need to pour into our young people. Now, I didn't ask you about this prior to coming on the show, but I'm feeling like, is there any way, do you have a copy of your books there?
I do.
Because I tried to pull them up I was going to pull them up on the screen, but the whole one didn't show up. So, all
Uh,
right. Is there any way that you can possibly read something out of it? Uh,
oh, sure.
okay,
Because
great.
people ask me all the time, how can you teach emotional intelligence in in a fairy tale. I'm like, well, you just wait and see.
Yes. Let's see. Let's see.
So this is from near the end of book 1.
And can you kind of give us a backdrop on the story? Tell us a little bit about the story.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage parents to please buy these books for your children to help them better understand emotional intelligence. But anyway, go ahead. I'll be
Okay.
quiet.
So the backstory is that Bella Santini is a 14-year-old girl raised in England and on a camping trip with her parents, which, as a typical 14-year-old girl, she did not want to go.
Right.
Yeah. Um, on a camping trip with her parents, she is arrested and brought to a fairy world, basically. So she stumbles on a meadow where there's fairies in a ceremony. They arrest her for intruding on the ceremony and whisk her off to their world. Um, she is basically, she has to figure out how to make it in a strange world. In this particular chapter, she and a friend are on a journey. They have a task that they must fulfill, and they go to an alternative dimension. This dimension is peopled by emotion. So they're not physical people, but feelings that float around. We're in an alternate world, a parallel reality known as Emovia, which is only accessible through the portal within that tree. The chalice was hidden in this dark world by a rebel, trying to diminish the Seelie Court's power. How will we find it? Bella asked. It's so dark here. Give me a minute. Blimey, I can provide illumination. Torvieto took a deep breath and held it, and then another one, one after the other, without exhaling. With each influx of air, his eyes glowed brighter. After 5 breaths, his eyes were bright twin lights, illuminating the area about 20 feet in front of them. Torvieto let out a big exhale. This will last for approximately 1 hour. I can manage to repeat this glow up to 3 times, but then I must sleep to recuperate. We must complete this minging task within 2 hours, leaving us time to seek the return path to our world. Now let's get moving. Though she could see nothing, Bella felt the sensation of being watched. Her skin was crawling. She tried to shake off the eerie feeling, to no avail. She wished she could see her arms to make sure nothing was there. The world was dark and still and quiet, and yet filled with sensations. Bella wondered why they weren't encountering any people. As they traveled down one dark hallway, they both felt an overwhelming sadness come over them. Bella started to cry, while Torvieto was sniffling. As they continued up the hallway, the feelings deepened. Bella was openly sobbing, unable to stop. Torvieto could not see well because the tears that started flowing had effect of dimming the fire in his eyes. Soon they were stopped without life, as both of them were overcome by a deep sadness.
Wow. Wow.
So in that chapter, the discussion between the two characters is, what tools do you know for facing our emotions? And they use breath work, and they end up being able to traverse the world, fulfill their task, and return to where they started.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And so breathing is one of the techniques.
Yeah, there are
Let's,
there are several different breathing techniques that can actually instill calmness. So, if you have a child who's anxious, you can teach them the 4-7-8 breath, which you breathe in for the count of 4, you hold it for the count of 7, and you let it out for the count of 8. And depending on the age of the child, you can change that to 3, 4, 5. You can adjust it to the child's age. But what happens is that brings the cortisol level down and brings lots of calming chemicals throughout your body.
so breathing on a count of 4, 7,
8.
8. 4, 7, 8. Okay,
Mhm.
I know that breathing is a great way to calm yourself and to relax. It is a great way to do that. I use it often myself.
Me too.
Yes. So, so breathing is one of those techniques. And can you kind of share some other things when a child, well, first of all, why don't we define emotional intelligence? I think
Mm.
we should do that first. How would you define that?
Well, emotional intelligence is really self awareness, understanding your emotions, your emotional triggers, and how to manage them so that you can proceed through life without becoming very reactive to your circumstances.
Yes. Now, let me ask you, for a child who may have grown up like you did, like I did, with the negatives being told to us, how do you help a child that may be living in that environment
Mhm.
and they're stuck in that environment?
Um, there are several understandings that could be helpful in that environment. First, that hurt people.
Yes, understanding that. Hurt people hurt
Yeah,
people.
having a thorough understanding that when people are intolerant, bullies, lashing out, they are coming from a space of hurt. And having that compassion, even though they're hurting you, still holding the compassion and seeing that this is where they're coming from can change your interpretation of the situation.
Yes, yes. And how would you, because we're talking about bullying here, so how would you encourage a child to address the issue?
Yeah, it's we only become reactive to something that someone does or says if we're carrying energy that matches that behavior. So when I was in my marriage, I was very reactive to being yelled at. And I called it being screamed at because that's how it felt to me. So I carried that energy because my father had yelled and screamed at me as a child. And when my ex husband brought that behavior to the table, I reacted as if I was that child.
Yes,
So, understanding that if we have a reaction to behavior, it's it's something in us and we take responsibility for our own reactions. So instead of pointing a finger and saying he did this to me and I had to get mad, you're
right.
saying
You made me mad.
exactly. It would be more emotionally intelligent to say, wow, I was reactive to that. And okay, that means I'm carrying some of this energy and I can do the inner child work to um, just limit this reactivity.
So when a child is in that type of environment and is consistent, and I know
Mhm.
yelling is a major, major problem. People don't understand the impact that yelling has.
You know, I met a man who, when he was 14, he ran away because he couldn't stand to live in the environment of his parents fighting as much as they did. He lived at Walmart, and he actually was able to lift himself. So they're making a movie about him from Walmart to Wall Street.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So getting away from it, but you got to. I'm playing the devil's advocate here. You've got children that are in these environments. We're teaching them to understand how to not react when those things are happening to them. So the breathing is one way.
yep,
So we're talking about 5, 6, 7 year olds. What would you say to them? And I know your book, reading the book will help them better understand.
yeah.
But
What I would say to them is that you are magical, and the people around you are hurting, and they've forgotten how magical they are. And their behavior doesn't change who you are, because you are magical. And then, you know, when I was in my marriage, I had to leave before I could heal. And that was a choice that I could make. As a child, I couldn't choose to leave my dad.
right, exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. And that's why we need to help kids that are in those environments understand that this is coming from a place of hurt of that individual. That adult is hurting. And it's not that they're taking it out on you. They're just
there's
feel
nothing
they're
wrong with you.
right, right. There's nothing wrong with you,
Yes.
and you need to understand that they're hurting, and also teaching them, about their self-worth, their
Mhm.
affirmations, and speaking life into themselves in the midst of all of that.
And even a child living in those circumstances, there can be a ray of light from a teacher, from a counselor, from anyone who stops to recognize the value of that child and speak
Yes.
it to that child.
Yes, yes, and getting teachers, but a lot of teachers, they're there. There are some great teachers out there, but
There
then
are.
there are some great teachers out there, but then there are teachers that are kind of living in their own stuff as well. You
We all
know,
have stuff.
yeah, we all have stuff. We all have stuff, but being
Yeah.
able to understand that as a teacher or as a child provider, we have to understand that we cannot allow that kind of baggage to determine how we treat children. I remember
Yeah.
substituting one day, substituting at a middle school, and I had just done That's My Greatness with these kids. I had just finished it and had just said to them, that's what I expect from you. I expect your greatness. A
Mhm.
teacher sticks her head in the door and she says, you knuckleheads better behave for her.
Yeah. So, what message is there? Thank you.
And
Yeah.
so,
And they say that for every criticism, there has to be like 10 times someone is prayed to counterbalance every
Yes.
criticism. And it's really hard to be able to give that to every child. And that's what I hope that my books can do for them. Have When a child can feel their own value and they
Yes.
don't need someone outside of them telling them their value, then they are strengthened and are able to deal better with the
Yes.
situations around them.
Yes. Yes. I agree wholeheartedly. And we
Yeah.
have to, but that's why giving them tools that
Yep.
they can relate to and also go into, for lack of a better word, go into their closets and affirm themselves. Sometimes we have to encourage ourselves because we're not getting it from elsewhere. And
Often.
so,
Yeah.
yes,
I mean, that was the first 54 years of my life was I had to tell myself I was okay. But
yes,
yeah.
yes, exactly, exactly. And so giving them those kinds of tools so that even if they're in the midst of being told all these negative things, they can recognize their true value and understand, like you said, they're magical.
Yeah.
Kids
They
are,
are.
they are, they
Yeah.
are. Kids are magical. And if they can understand that and understand their greatness and walk in it regardless of what's going on. I wish I had known how to do that as
Me
a
too.
child. I wish I had known how to do that. And now we're teaching kids how to do that. And
Yeah.
it's so important.
I if you look up emotional intelligence and if you just Google it and you say, why is it good for kids? It'll talk about doing better in school. It'll talk about having better relationships. But what it doesn't say, and what I believe it to be, is almost an inoculation against suicide and substance abuse and alcoholism and self harming and overeating and bulimia and all these behaviors that are driven because the
Of the hurt.
individual wants to escape pain.
Yes. Yes, and yes, absolutely. And so understanding this is such an important topic. And because kids are hurting. I remember like when I do these programs in the schools and what have you, one of the questions I do ask them is what is it that you need to work on? And I can't tell you how many kids have said, I need to work on my anger issues. Now, I don't just get them to say, I need to work on my anger issues. I want to help me understand. Give me an example of
Right.
when you're angry or what happens when you're angry. And they do, they share, and so,
Anger is an emotion that there are big emotions and anger and grief and feeling unwanted and unloved are huge
yes,
emotions. And I grew up, um, I think when I was 4 or 5, I decided that people who are angry were bad because of the behavior that I experienced. And I could not be angry. So I repressed anger. And there was a time in my 40s, I said, I don't get angry. But it was me not
suppressing it.
facing my own ability to be anger. Anger is simply an emotion, and it's simply telling us that we feel something's not right in our world and we don't have control we don't know how to affect this thing that is bothering us. And so when we feel anger, it's really good to let it out. And what I teach basically is a 3-step process
Okay.
for being with your emotion. And what you do is you notice, you feel an emotion. You feel it.
Yes.
You notice, like, where is it in your body? What is it sharp? Is it dull? Is it aching? How does it feel?
Okay.
Feel.
And as you're saying this, I'm going to put it in the chat. Feel
Okay.
the emotion.
Feel the emotion and then acknowledge it. You can give it a name. I feel, and then sad, let's just say. I feel angry right now. And it's important to watch our I am
Yes.
words, because whenever we say I am, we're claiming that to be who we are.
Yes.
So we never want to claim an emotion as our identity.
Yes.
So we say, I feel. I feel angry. And then the third is to allow. So you feel it, you name it, you allow it. And this isn't about accepting the circumstances. It is saying, I give myself permission to feel the way I feel.
Yes.
And when you do that, the feeling, which is energy, is allowed to flow and it quickly dissipates. The biochemistry of a feeling is 90 seconds. Unless our mind
Take us somewhere else.
gets involved.
Yes.
Yeah, and that stretches it out. So when our mind gets involved, it's like, oh, I don't want to feel this way. Or he did that to me.
Yes.
It's not fair.
Yes.
There are all these things that our mind will say. And as we go down those roads, the feeling is extended.
Yes.
When we can feel, name, and allow without letting our mind engage, the emotion is fleeting. And
Yes.
so when we think about things like grief or anger, when there's a big injustice, you may have to go through that process more than once. But each time you do, you're dissipating some of the stored energy.
Yes.
And when you have no stored energy left, you're not reactive to that behavior.
Yes. Beautiful. Absolutely. And this not only applies to children, but adults as well. We
Yeah.
all need to get in tune with what we're feeling, acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, and acknowledge how you're feeling, and then move on. Once you've acknowledged it, awareness precedes change. And once you acknowledge it and not
Give yourself
allow
permission.
and give yourself permission to feel that way
Yeah.
for a minute and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with grief, though, grief is one of those things where we can never tell a person how to grieve. You know,
Absolutely. I was doing a podcast with a woman who she lost her best friend's son was killed in a car accident 2 days before our podcast.
oh,
And I told her, look, we don't have to do this. And I said, and further, if at any time during the podcast you feel the feeling come on, take 5 minutes, break off and do something. I'll keep the audience warm. You don't have to worry about that, but just give yourself permission to feel. And for her, it was like she was trying to hold it together. She was trying to show up. The show must go on. And once she gave herself permission to feel, it was like that burden lifted. And she was able to do the whole podcast without breaking off. But because with things like grief, we push it away because we think, oh, I'm going to work. I can't have that feeling here. But if you feel, name, allow it, it's only a few minutes, so you can. And just give yourself permission to feel what you feel.
Yes, that is wonderful. Great information. I do have a ad that I need to play. And
Okay.
so I want to take a few minutes to do that, and we will be right back. Let me pull it up here. And I'll play this and then we'll be back. I'm okay. I'll be right. We'll be right back. And that was a word from our sponsor, Success Express. If you need promo items or marketing tools, you want to contact Express Success. All right. So I wanted to do that. And we're also honoring Father's Day,
Yeah.
since this is the weekend of Father's Day, and it's also the weekend of Juneteenth. And
It
so
is.
those, yes. And so we've got a lot of things going on this weekend. And I do want to mention that my camp, I'm still doing my camp. And so if anyone is interested, please contact me, or you can register at bit.ly/greatness camp. And I do have it here. Let me put it in the chat right quick. And so again, 8 to 12-year olds, it's an online camp. And the first week was phenomenal. This young man that was in the camp was phenomenal. And his mom was so impressed with what we did that she contracted with me to continue to work with him. And so if you want to make a difference in your child's life, you want to get Angela's books, and you want to come to my camp. Awesome. Okay, so one of the other things I want you to just kind of just share some more about emotional intelligence, and I'm loving this conversation. And also, normally I have comments coming in. If you are wanting to say something and I'm not seeing your comments, please go to the Facebook Vera Thomas Show and give us some feedback so that we can hear what you have to say about emotional intelligence. Yes.
Well, one of the nice things that I find about the books that I write is that, you know, frankly, you and I and a lot of other people were raised in an era where don't cry. And hey, especially boys, it's not okay for you to show your feelings. You have to man up. These messages were your feelings are not okay and you cannot express them. And so there was a lot of repression of
Yes.
feelings. And that translates. So when a feeling is repressed, because it's energy, that energy becomes stored in our cells, and it can translate into cellular change, it can translate into dis-ease,
Yes.
but it also translates into emotional energy that you carry with you. And so when you think about all those years of repressing emotions, that made us more likely to be triggered emotionally by someone's behavior.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
and so when we allow our emotions and we let them flow, we are de-triggering ourselves. And eventually you get to a point where it's like, oh, hey, that happened. Okay.
Yes.
Says a lot about that person, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes. And being able to say that and to understand it's about that person
Yeah.
and not you, and not, even though you're being lashed at, you're being attacked verbally, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Yeah.
If we can just understand that that person is hurting, that person, and suppressing, you're talking about suppressing our thoughts and our feelings, not being allowed to cry as little boys, and all that bottled up stuff, like you said, it can make you sick. You talk about dis-ease,
Yep.
that can make you sick, keeping things inside.
Hmm.
And if it doesn't come out, it stays in, it festers, and it builds up, and it can make you sick.
Yeah.
Headaches, stomach aches, back aches, emotional distress can be caused from keeping things inside and not expressing.
Yeah. So how do you safely express rage? That's something. You talked about Juneteenth coming up, and one thing that really strikes me is, especially young Black males, there is so much generational trauma handed down. And it's not, that the grandparents or were trying to harm the kid. They had their experiences and they shared their experiences as a warning to the kid. But that generational trauma builds up. And so even sometimes when we're reactive, it's not because of our own trauma, but it's generational trauma. And so,
But, oh, go
even
ahead.
using these tools to kind of deactivate that trauma, because when you become enraged and act out, it's not helping you, other than it's an expression of that emotion.
Yes.
When you act out in rage, um, you turn people away from you, basically.
But one of the things that we really have to seriously consider, a lot of the trauma that our Black men have faced has been how society as a whole, not just within the home, the
Oh no,
generational.
because it's reinforced over and over again. I say when my son was 16, I did not have to. I had white privilege. I did not have to consider that he could be shot by the police just for driving. And that is something that many Black parents had to consider.
Yes, and so the trauma, first of all, their fathers have experienced the trauma, their grandfathers have experienced the trauma, and they try to express to help alleviate the younger ones feeling that trauma. But when you experience
Yeah.
what you, I mean, and there is not one. Well, I don't want to. I would venture to say that there is not one Black male that has not experienced some kind of trauma as a result of systemic racism, as all the things that we go through that other people would never understand because that trauma, and so a lot of that built up trauma is as a result of all the things that people go through on their jobs, go through in in society, walking down the street, driving down the street, and
And
so
the thing is that we are all the same. There's no, if you cut your finger and I
we
cut my
bleed
finger,
red.
we bleed red.
Yes,
We have eyes, nose, mouth. We birth children. We raise children. We want the best for our children. There are more things about us that are the same than
yes,
different. And
yes,
fear of someone because they're different feeds a lot of that behavior that was so harmful to Black society.
yes, and it continues, and it's
It
sad. It
does.
continues,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter how much we make effort to do our best, to be our best, to put forth all these efforts. It doesn't matter because this hatred, because of skin color, and like you said, we, like you and me, for example, we both went through the same similar experience.
We did. Yeah.
We went through the same similar experiences. And so the problems are more across the board, except for how minorities and people of color are treated. And I have
And
to say,
and yeah, what I would say is when we can look at each other through our heart.
yes, it's a heart thing. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other here I am. I'm a white woman. So
No
like
joke.
well, it's like how much gravitas can I carry when I'm speaking to a crowd that has gone through so much more than I have ever gone through. But the question that I would ask is, do you want your trauma to define you? Or do you want your trauma to fuel your greatness?
Absolutely. 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 Because through our pain, we gain our purpose.
Yeah.
And once we gain our purpose, then we recognize the reason for our pain. Because we couldn't have our purpose
Without that,
without that pain,
I mean,
And
yeah, I could wish for a better childhood. I could wish that my first marriage was, not toxic.
yeah,
But I also recognize that I brought toxicity to it because I was in judgment of anger. His go-to behavior, because he was raised in an angry house, was anger. So I would judge his anger. He would get angry because I judged his anger, and I would judge his anger, and it was a very toxic downward
yeah,
spiral.
yes.
Yeah.
And now, did you leave him before your children were?
I stayed. I'd probably still be there and not be talking to anybody on any podcasts. But in 2017, a wildfire swept through Northern California and it destroyed our family home. So we lost everything. We walked out with the clothes on our back. And somewhere in the subsequent 6 months, I went into a dark night of the soul where I questioned, if your world can change in 10 minutes, then what am I doing being miserable? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And I realized that stuff is just stuff. It can be replaced. And even those things that we attach our memories to, it's just a placeholder for memories that are really in here.
Yes.
And so stuff can be replaced, but relationships can't.
Amen.
And so that was at some point, a person asked me if you knew that marriage was eternal, would you marry your husband again, knowing it would be eternal? And I said, I would not damn myself to that life forever.
I know that's right.
And then I'm like, well, what am I doing here now?
I know that's right. We even the domestic violent kind of thing we've shared. We share that as well.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
he wasn't he knew how to hurt with words.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
words are just as powerful
As
as
a
getting hit.
yeah.
You know, if not more so, because at least
Because
the
it's hidden.
scar, right, right, and it's a scar
Yeah.
that's hidden. You know.
And when you're with someone and they know your buttons, then they're re-injuring the prior wounding.
Yes, it's like taking salt and just pouring it in the wound, and just keeping that agitation and all that negativity. It's so toxic. Just
It
if you're in a toxic relationship, get out of it. I mean,
you
it doesn't.
cannot save a toxic relationship.
No, you can't. I mean, because it takes two people to want it to get better
Yeah. Yeah. And
before it
I'm not
can
an
get better.
advocate for divorce because what I'm an advocate for is looking at ourselves and seeing why am I reactive to what's going on?
Yes.
Asking those questions, investigate, trying to remember when was the first time I felt this way, revisiting that situation, reimagining, um, the outcome where you're giving your inner child a new script for that situation.
Yes.
That um, is really the answer. Because if you leave a marriage for behavior that made you triggered and you don't do the inner work,
Yes.
you will end up in that same situation.
Yes, and then you wonder why the same
Why
stuff
is this
keeps
always
happening.
happening to me?
Right, right, exactly, exactly. And I know, like, after building my confidence and self-esteem and trying to become the person I wanted to be, and then getting into a marriage, I lost all of that, all the confidence, all the self-esteem. I lost it all because you cannot. It's very difficult to maintain a positive attitude when you've got all this toxicity around you. And
I
so
say
after,
when you are so because hurt people. My former husband, he would have benefited from unconditional love and acceptance. But you cannot give unconditional love when you're the recipient of rage and blame
right,
because you'll have the condition that you treat me right.
right,
So,
exactly, exactly, exactly. And then after getting out of it, it takes a while to
yeah,
get
there's a
back to
healing.
yourself.
Oh boy, that is such a, yeah, that is a deep rabbit hole because
Yes,
after I left the marriage, I would say for the first 2 months, I didn't know who I was.
right. And that's typical.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times people stay in those toxic environments because they're afraid of what is to come if they get out of it. You
Yeah.
know,
The, Preston Smiles talks about the comfort couch. And no
yes,
matter what the comfort couch looks like, it could be a toxic marriage, it could be an abusive parent, it could be, whatever it is, it's what we know.
right.
And we can get off the couch and we can move towards that castle, that dream castle of the life we really want to live.
Yes.
But as soon as we hit adversity on that road towards the castle,
Then we want to go right
half
back.
of the people will run back to the couch
But
because
you
at
know,
least they know that. They know what to expect. The fear of uncertainty is what keeps people from changing.
I know. And the thing is, I mean, because I left my ex husband when my son was 6 months old. And my greatest fear in life was the fear of being a single mom. But my greater fear was staying in that type of environment. But I mean, and it was not easy. I mean,
No,
it was not easy. I went through a whole bunch of stuff, good, bad, and indifferent, but it was still better than staying in that toxic environment, especially knowing that I don't want my son to
mhm.
be like that. I don't want my son to know that kind of toxicity. I didn't. And so it made it
No,
hard.
it's so I thought about leaving when my son was 2 years old, but I knew that my former husband would gain equal custody. And so what I was faced with was knowing that my son would not have anyone to intervene in the weeks that my husband had him. And my former husband, he became angry when things weren't going the way he wanted. So I couldn't leave my son
Protected.
unprotected. Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah. So sometimes
understand.
we make that decision to live within this situation. Um, and I know that that meant that he was exposed to the toxicity of his father and me together. And I still think it may have been the better decision.
And everybody has to do what they feel is the best thing for them at that time.
Exactly.
And I can't believe we only have 2 minutes left. And I do want to share, I want to say happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there. And
Mm,
I want to share a father's poem.
beautiful. Fathers
Okay.
are so important.
They are. And little girls need their dads.
And so do boys.
Little boys do too, but I mean, they do, but little boys need their dads. Little girls really need their dads as well, because I can't tell you how many times I've picked up girls at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning going to see some guy. And then I ask them, what type of relationship do you have with your dad? And in most cases, they don't.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
And so let me share this right quick. Father, provider, protector,
Mm,
role model for a son, the image of the man that will be the husband of your daughter when that time comes. What's best for your children should be concern number one, regardless of the obstacles a father must overcome. Sometimes the injustices of our society towards many of our fathers can make it hard to stand, but you got to stand and be a man and a father to your children in every way you possibly can. Demonstrate their worth through you by the words that you say and the things that you do. Don't ever put your children down or call them out of their name. They may become whatever you claim. Lift them up to higher ground. Let their inner beauty be seen, be found. Show them and tell them how special they are. Be the light.
Mm.
Be the light. Be the light to take them far. Show them and tell them how much you really care and let them know no matter what, you will always, in all ways, be there. Pray that our fathers will be guided by the light to lead their children in the ways that are right. Happy Father's Day. Happy Juneteenth. And thank you, Angela, for being here with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And do you have some last parting words that you want to share regarding emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's give yourself grace because we weren't taught this stuff. I learned it the hard way, and you may not have learned it at all. So give yourself grace. You're doing the best you can with the tools you have, but know that there are tools that can help you do even better.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And what I want to say, thank you, listening audience. And there will be replays of this that I know people will watch, and it will also be on the podcast that I now am a part of. So have a great week, and just thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to pull you down. Don't leave yet, though. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy Father's Day. Love on your children. Love on your fathers. And happy Juneteenth. Remember what Juneteenth is all about. God bless you. God bless you all.
The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. Let's talk about it. 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 Let's talk about it.